So we understand that it's failed at this point. I'm curious, if this is over or something that you feel like will be voted on again?
I think it'll come back up. You had one flip there at the end, I believe Congressman Murphy, just so he could call it back up. There's one or two in play. I think when people go home and listen to their constituents, though, they understand the frustration with Secretary Mayorkas. I mean, he's told us the border is secure, ma'am. And the border, nobody thinks the border is secure unless you're an anarchist. There's no shape, form, or fashion in anything that he's said that has been truthful. So I don't really have a problem with folks changing their mind. I suspect some will, and when they go home and talk to their constituents.
As you know, there are some who say that this focus on impeaching him is misguided, that if you were to pass this bill that they've been working on, this bipartisan bill in the Senate, that it would give people the tools in order to enforce the border. And they're saying that Mayorkas simply doesn't have the tools.
Well, that's not accurate, ma'am. I've been to the border, and overwhelmingly they tell me, they say, Tim, just let us enforce the laws that are already on the books. You know, the things that President has chosen not to enforce is he could end the catch and release. He could reinstate remain in Mexico. He could enter into some of these asylum cooperative agreements. This bill, though, that's coming over from the Senate, $118 billion. It's a Ukraine bill, ma'am. $60 billion for this. Seems like it's a never-ending war in Ukraine. I just don't buy that. 5,000 a day is when it sets off the trigger. So if 4,999 come across, that's okay. You're legalizing an illegal activity, and to me, that's not sound law.
Congressman, I guess my question about this bill is why say, look, we won't even accept this. This is dead on arrival, rather than say, hey, you know what? Let's have a conversation about the potential for compromise that maybe we would consider.
Well, I'm incredibly glad you brought that up, ma'am, because we actually sent H.R. 2, the House did, over to the Senate, and the Speaker of the Senate will not bring it up. He won't bring it up at all, and it's just sitting over there. It's been over there for months. Why doesn't the president encourage them to do that instead of going down this political football road, which we all know is just going to lead to more trouble? I mean, we need to demagnetize this country. New York's put $53 million into credit cards for illegals to spend. They're kicking people out of their schools, kicking veterans out of nursing homes to house these folks. You know, that right is wrong and left is right and up is down. This is not the way America should be run. The president can end a lot of these things just with the stroke of a pen, but he chooses not to.
The House GOP has passed different border legislation without a single Democratic vote. In the Senate, one of the most conservative members, Ray Lankford, worked for months to get the first meaningful bipartisan border legislation in years. Today, he said, we can't keep doing this. We've got to find ways to stop the chaos that's happening on our southern border. Since it is a divided government, are there specific members in the House on the other side of the aisle you would work with in order to try to come up with a compromise?
Oh, I work with members every day. My buddy Jared Moskowitz, closest to him probably as I am to any member on our side of the aisle, and he's probably as far left as I am right, ma'am. I don't think that's the problem. I think what you have is the uniparty, and I think where we need to lay the blame on this is not the Democrats or the Republicans, but these national chambers of commerce that you can see their tentacles in this in every angle. And all they want is cheap labor, ma'am, that has no representation. Somebody that if they get hurt, they're afraid to come forward because they know that they could be deported. They've been at the pinnacle of this since day one. They're the ones, them and the Uniparty, when they close the door, because you know the deal in the Senate, a lot of the complaints from other senators was they weren't involved in the conversation. It was a closed door meeting. I'd like to know who's behind those doors. And you can say somebody's conservative or they're liberal or what have you. But, man, when you close the doors in Washington, D.C., the only color they see is green. You know, they want to call it a swamp. This place is an open sewer, ma'am. Both sides. It needs to be cleaned out. It just flows in and nothing flows out. A swamp is a cool little ecosystem that God created. This is not a swamp.
You mentioned tentacles, and many, as you know, have suggested that these really are the tentacles of Donald Trump. That is the reason why Speaker Johnson is saying, even before he knew what was in the bill, that it was dead on arrival. How much of an impact do you think that Donald Trump has had in this, calling it a stupid bill, the dumbest thing that they could pass?
Very little, if any, ma'am. That we had already, most of it had leaked out. 5,000 a day. I don't know how much the more you need to see than 5,000 a day. What is that, over 1 million a year? We cannot keep going down this road. We have over 8 million in the last 3 years since this president took the White House. And man, what's most troubling to me, the number that's most troubling to me is the 100,000 children that nobody's talking about. They could be in, with these cartels, as evil as they are, God knows what horrible life they're in. And both parties need to be, we should be ashamed of ourselves that we're not addressing this at one point. But again, it's closed doors, it's leadership, it's the people that got the money, the K Street lobbyists, the whole bunch. It doesn't have anything to do with America. They don't care as long as they're, it really is, ma'am. It's portfolios over people. And that's exactly what's going on right here.
Portfolios over people. Representative Tim Burchett, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.